What happens when the person you judge most harshly turns out to be your greatest salvation? When the quiet charity you offer to the poor is actually a debt you are repaying to a king? Does poverty truly lie in the pockets, or in the heart that sees only what it expects to see? In the bustling, sun-baked heart of Ibadan, Nigeria, on a street corner choked with market dust and ambition, a simple lie was set into motion. The choice made was small, but the consequence would shake the very foundations of status, family, and tradition. The truth at stake was not about money, it was about integrity. This isn't just a story about a deception. It's a story about the distance between what we see in a person and the priceless worth of who they are. Before his name became the whispered shock of a community, there was Samuel. A student. A son. A stranger. Welcome to Stories by the King, where every story carries a heartbeat, and every truth demands to be heard. Now, before we begin, where in the world are you watching from? Is it morning in Accra, evening in Johannesburg, or midnight in London? Drop your location in the comments below, and don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Now, lean in. Because this isn't just about what happened, it's about what it means. The dust of Ibadan settled on the tires of the old Honda, coating Samuel in a fine, ochre film that made him look exactly as he intended, faded, unassuming, and a little desperate. He was not desperate, nor was he faded. Beneath the borrowed, threadbare shirt and scuffed sandals lay a mind sharp as a new razor and a pedigree that could buy the entire block. He had arrived in the city, the jewel of his family's dynasty, with a single backpack and a directive from his ailing grandfather, to spend 6 months living as if he had nothing, learning the weight of a man's effort when his name held no power. It was an ancient, peculiar rite of passage for the men of his house, a test of character administered in the harsh university of the street. Samuel, the heir apparent, the man who had only ever signed checks, now had to earn his bread. He rented a stifling single room in the densely packed Olaronsogo district, a place where the air was thick with the smell of cooking kerosene and hopeful prayers. He knew he was lying to the world, but he did not yet know he was lying to himself. His first real lesson came in the person of Sarah. She owned a small provision stall near the university gate, a tiny wooden booth crammed with sachets of water, biscuits, and cheap airtime cards. Sarah was a pillar of quiet strength, a woman who measured life not in profit margins, but in kindness. Her eyes, always tired but always warm, held the deep knowledge of true struggle. Samuel often came to her store, not just to buy, but to observe. He watched her gently give credit to struggling students, or slip an extra bottle of mineral to a sweating street hawker. He fabricated a simple story. He was a final-year student whose family farm had failed, leaving him penniless and alone. Sarah had simply nodded, her gaze accepting, not pitying. The word, she had said, her voice soft, is not a failure, my son. It is a classroom. And you are a bright student. That single sentence shattered the pride that had been subtly lacking in his pretense. The emotional tension of his deceit tightened with every passing day. He took a job washing taxis, a brutal, back-breaking occupation under the relentless sun. His hands, accustomed only to a pen and a steering wheel, blistered and bled. At the store, Sarah would see the grime and offer him a clean rag or a cold drink, refusing to let him pay for it. When you stand again, she'd tell him, you will remember the hands that held you up. He began to feel an actual, physical ache of guilt every time her small, calloused hand passed him a kindness he did not need, but gratefully accepted. He was living a lie, but her genuine compassion was slowly forging a real man out of the gold-plated figure he had once been. The deception was teaching him more about wealth than all the ledgers in his family's office. He started trying to repay her subtly. He would sweep the dirt away from her stall before the market opened, or help the old woman across the street carry her heavy baskets. He was performing good deeds, but his motivation was tainted. It was an attempt to lighten the burden of the lie he carried toward Sarah. One evening, an aggressive local official demanded an illegal bribe from Sarah, threatening to shut down her tiny business. Fear flashed in her eyes, the familiar terror of the small person against the system. Samuel, forgetting his poor persona, stepped forward, his voice suddenly hard, commanding, and carrying the unmistakable timbre of authority that only generations of power can grant. He spoke 3 sentences, citing an obscure city regulation and threatening to call a specific, high-ranking official. The man's demeanor crumbled. The official scurried away, and Sarah looked at Samuel, her eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and awe. "Samuel," she whispered, "you spoke like a chief. Who are you, truly?" The weight of the secret felt like a physical stone on his chest, but he forced a nervous laugh. I read law, Sarah. I just remembered what I studied." It was a clumsy lie, but she allowed it, still shaking. The moment hung between them, thick with unshared truth. Samuel realized, with a sickening clarity, that the cost of his lie was not the loss of his dignity, but the slow, agonizing corruption of his relationship with the one person who had shown him unconditional grace. He was close to breaking point, wondering if the lesson was worth the deceit, and the shadow of the truth waited patiently for its moment to strike. He had to tell her. Soon. The incident with the official had driven a subtle, almost invisible wedge between Samuel and Sarah. She was polite, kind as ever, but her gaze lingered on him now, thoughtful and searching. She no longer saw just the struggling student, she saw the sudden, sharp flash of something she could not name, something too powerful for the Olaronsogo district. Meanwhile, the test of character his grandfather had imposed reached its cruelest phase. His grandfather, knowing Samuel was in Ibadan, had sent one of his agents to deliberately complicate his life, to truly test his mettle. The agent, posing as a landlord, suddenly doubled the rent on Samuel's tiny room, demanding immediate payment. This was the ultimate challenge. How would the poor Samuel solve a problem that only the rich Samuel could easily dismiss? He tried every legitimate avenue, extra shift washing taxis, selling his only nice watch, begging for extensions, but the agent was relentless. The struggle was excruciating. Sleep became a luxury, and exhaustion etched itself onto his face. He missed a few days of work, unable to drag his aching body out of the room, and for the first time, he felt the true, gnawing hunger of want. Sarah, noticing his absence, came looking for him. She found him sitting on the edge of his bed, head in his hands, defeated. He confessed the whole fabricated story of the failed farm and the debts, embellishing it slightly to make his plight seem impossible. He washed her face, prepared for pity, but what he saw was a profound, heartbreaking empathy. She reached into the pocket of her faded apron and pulled out a tightly folded, well-worn wad of naira notes. It was clearly the entire day's taking, perhaps more. "Take it, Samuel," she insisted, pressing the money into his hand. "You will pay me back when you can." But no man of worth should sleep with hunger and fear as his neighbors. The amount was exactly what he needed to cover the extortionate rent, and the gesture struck Samuel harder than any of the hardships he had faced. He had billions in a bank account miles away, and this woman, who earned just enough to feed her own family, was offering him her survival. In that moment, the entire charade collapsed in his heart. His test felt like a mockery of her life. He wept, real tears of self-disgust, but she misunderstood his emotion, thinking it was the relief of a desperate man. The truth began to unravel in a way neither of them could control. Samuel's grandfather, the elder, became severely ill, and the family's chief of staff was dispatched to Ibadan to retrieve the heir immediately. The chief of staff, a stern man named Mr. George, arrived in a motorcade of black, tinted window SUVs, cutting through the narrow Olaronsogo streets like a knife through butter. The sight of such luxury and power in their dusty neighborhood caused a sensation. The motorcade stopped directly in front of Sarah's stall, where Samuel was quietly stacking biscuit tins, preparing to tell her the truth that very afternoon. He looked up, his face a mask of dread and resignation. Mr. George, impeccably dressed and radiating cold authority, stepped out and surveyed the scene. His eyes, trained to recognize the hierarchy of 1,000 business meetings, immediately found the figure in the soiled, tattered clothes. "Mr. Samuel," he boomed, his voice carrying an unyielding command that silenced the entire market. "Your grandfather is asking for you. We must leave now." The noise of the market ceased completely. A heavy, palpable silence descended, broken only by the hum of the idling luxury engines. Every eye, the hawkers, the shoppers, the children, the market women, fixed instantly on the man in the dirty shirt, who was now being addressed with the profound respect reserved for royalty. Sarah was standing right beside Samuel. Her hands, which had just offered him her day's earnings, dropped the tray she was holding. Biscuits scattered across the dirt. She looked at Samuel, then at the motorcade, then back at him, her face transitioning through disbelief, confusion, and finally, a deep, wounded betrayal. The lie he had cultivated so carefully had just been exposed, not by his confession, but by the undeniable, shocking evidence of his true identity. The struggling student, the man she had fed and helped, was not poor at all. He was the heir. He was the next Boba Olowo, the wealthy one, of the entire region. The revelation hung in the air, a devastating emotional punch that left Sarah gasping for air and Samuel paralyzed with shame. The confrontation was swift, public, and brutal in its simplicity. Sarah did not shout, she did not cry. Her face, usually so warm and welcoming, was blank, hardened by the sudden weight of the deception. "You," she said, the single word a quiet, devastating accusation. "You lied. You took my Alefia, my peace, and you turned it into a game." The shame was unbearable. Samuel knew no apology could fix this. He was yanked from his existence and placed, blinking, into the backseat of a waiting SUV. As the motorcade pulled away, the last image he saw was Sarah, standing amidst the scattered biscuits, her back ramrod straight, refusing to even look at the cloud of dust his departure created. He had passed the test of endurance but failed the test of integrity. 6 weeks later, his grandfather, the elder, had recovered, and Samuel, now groomed, suited, and occupying his rightful seat at the head of the boardroom, was a different man. He was the heir, the successful graduate of the poverty school, ready to take the reins of a sprawling business empire. Yet, the victory felt hollow. The weight of Sarah's silent scorn was heavier than any boardroom responsibility. He confessed everything to his grandfather, not as an excuse, but as a lesson learned. The elder listened patiently, nodding. "The test was to see if you could survive with nothing," the old man said. "The real lesson, my son, is that a man's wealth is measured by the character he reveals when he has the power to deceive. Go back and fix your lie, but do not fix it with money." Samuel returned to Olaronsogo alone, driving a modest car he had bought specifically for the journey. He found Sarah's stall closed. The market woman told him she had stopped coming a week after he left, heartbroken and ashamed that she had been so easily fooled. They also told him about the devastating, secret truth: Sarah's only son, Joseph, a brilliant boy, had just lost his university scholarship because she couldn't afford the small administrative fee. This was the real reason she had risked giving him all her money. The emotional stakes had never been about him, they were about her son's future. Samuel finally found Sarah at her small house, her head bent in prayer, her face wet with quiet tears. He knelt before her, not as the heir, but as the grateful student she had once nurtured. He did not lead with the truth of his identity, he led with the truth of his heart. "Sarah," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I am not here to return your money, or to pay a debt. I am here to tell you that when I was washing taxis, you did not see a pauper. You saw a man. When you fed me, you did not feed a stranger, you fed the man I should have been all along. The lie was mine, and I have paid for it in shame." He then told her the full, unvarnished story of his grandfather's test. Then came the shock. He did not offer her money, he offered her partnership. He told her that he had spent the last 2 weeks drawing up the paperwork for a fully funded, permanent foundation dedicated to the education of children in Olaransogo. The foundation's name: the Sarah and Joseph Educational Trust. "I do not want to give you money," he explained, tears in his eyes. "I want you to run the foundation. I need your heart, your wisdom, and your discerning eyes. You will be the director. You will decide which child deserves a chance. And your son, Joseph, will be the first beneficiary of his mother's wisdom and selflessness." Sarah finally looked at him, her heart tearing open with the immensity of the offer and the profound respect it contained. She wasn't being paid off, she was being elevated. She gasped, realizing that her charity to the poor student had unknowingly secured her son's future and cemented her own legacy as a leader of goodwill. The liar was not a con man, he was the future king, and he wanted her as his most trusted advisor. Sarah never became a billionaire, but she took her place as the wise director of the trust, her heart still rooted in the market where she once sold biscuits. The old lie was dissolved not in cash, but in the truth of service. Not because of what he had, but because he chose with his heart. And a heart that chooses love over luxury, character over cash, and purpose over prestige, will never lead you wrong. If this story moved you, hit like, share it, and tell me in the comments, what would you choose, wealth without integrity, or integrity without a home? Subscribe to Stories by the King, where every story carries a heartbeat, and every choice carries a lesson. This is Stories by the King, where truth heals, and courage finds its home.